It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I think many of us are experiencing a certain degree of deja vu, chaos, or as many Trump people say, disruption is now taking place at the federal level. At the end of the day, is there any possible way this could benefit the country? These major shakeups that the American people were asking for with the election of Donald Trump.
Sure, there are a lot of ways it could benefit the country if they actually knew what they were doing. The problem is they don't know what they're doing. I mean, if they could ever get the government to work better, that would benefit the country. But I doubt that any of the things that they're doing in the way they're doing it with this crazy meat axe, undermining every constitutional role for the Congress and basically going their own way. I don't see that winding up doing very much good for the country. But we knew when we elected President Trump, that he had a hard time with the truth. I looked up in Wikipedia Trump and truth, and it says he's made tens of thousands of false and misleading claims. The Washington Post in the first term said he lied 30,573 times. That's an average of 21 lies a day. But the truth is, there are two things he told the truth about in this campaign. One, that he wanted to be a dictator on day one. And the second, that he was going to have this rampage of retribution against his political enemies. And that's what he's done. And when you put that together with the frenetic pace and a bunch of people don't have any idea about how government works, they don't understand that the bosses in the government are the people, not the elected officials. What do you get is you get a mean and petty quasi-dictator. Look, I'm not going to go through everything he's done and try to comment. That's what he'd love Democrats to do, want to chase him because he thinks on some things, and he's right. He'd probably get the better end of the argument, even if his policies don't make any sense. Craig and I both worked in the White House, and it's a pretty heady place, even for modest people. And every president wants to expand presidential power, but the way Trump in this crowd is operating right now is to essentially say there are no other co-equal branches. The courts, the Congress don't matter. What we've had is a series of sham hearings where these nominees disavow their life, basically come in like Robert F. Kennedy did yesterday. He's written book, spent his whole life being an anti-vaxxer, and comes in and says he lies, like Trump does. It doesn't matter that you have the tape of what he said 2 days before, and that he, and says he's really for vaccines. And the Republicans seem to be willing to go along with this. We'll see. But I hope the Hegseth nomination isn't a prototype where you get 3 Republican votes against him. Yeah. I've got a feeling we're going to get a lot of nominees these unqualified nominees who are going to slip through with 3 votes against them. And so individual Republican senators will say, well, I vote against the worst. I got to vote against the worst one. But the plan was to get them all through. And I think that would be awful for the country. But until I'm proven wrong, I suspect that'll be the case. Yeah. And I don't want to make the Democrats blameless on this. Yeah. I mean, they haven't been very effective, to be honest with you, in how they've gone after these nominees that certainly weren't on Hegseth. Also, I mentioned this before, but I think it was in 2013 when Harry Reid, basically, in order to get some Obama judicial nominations through, gave up the congressional precedent of being able to filibuster cabinet nominees, and we paid a price for it in 2017. We're paying a price for it this time.
Yeah.
I just want to talk briefly about the power of the purse. I mean, I guess he's now rescinded his order to stop the freeze $3 trillion in spending. I mean, I'm sure Elon Musk is a very smart man. He's got to be to make all this money. But I just can't believe that he had any idea of what he was doing or Trump did when they when they issued this executive or this memorandum to freeze spending. I mean, his incoming director of the budget, who was also his director of the budget in his first term, said in 2023 that we're in a post-constitutional era, and he doesn't believe that Congress has that Article 1 means anything, essentially, and Congress doesn't have any responsibility for the power of the purse. I just want to say that, and I think some of our viewers know this, but I was going to try to hold up a picture, but the picture wasn't good enough quality. I have on my wall the pen from Richard Nixon when we, for the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Act, which now seems to be an important act. That act was a bipartisan response to Nixon's attempt to do what Trump did. Only Nixon did it, with a few programs, not with the whole government, to impound or not spend money Congress appropriated. And there was such a bipartisan uprising in the Senate. And we spent a year and a half writing this impoundment control law. The principal authors were Sam Ervin, the great constitutionalist, Ed Muskie on the Democratic side, Chuck Percy from Illinois, and Bill Brock, our friend, the late Bill Brock, on the Republican side. And so what they're doing is completely illegal. I mean, I wrote the damn bill, and but they completely disregard it. Now they had to pull it back, and I suspect that, and Craig will appreciate this, the reason they pulled it back didn't have anything to do with the Constitution. They don't care about that. Yeah. But what they learned is that as wasteful as federal spending is, as crazy as some of the things we pay for, there's somebody who receives that on the receiving end of every check. And so I'm sure they got a lot of flack from even the Republicans, particularly in the House, whose constituents said, "I'm not going to get my check."
Hey, Craig, I want to bring you into this. There might be some strategy to chaos or disruption, right? I mean, he can go ahead with these initiatives, get the credit for it, and then he's dependent on the institutions to pull him back.
So I want to come at this a little differently, given the news story of the day and for some period of time. But if there's a strategy to the chaos, it's that Donald Trump knows that chaos makes news. And he literally sends these young reporters out running in every direction with commentary about the things that he's doing or purportedly going to do. And as Al points out, some of it never happens. The Trump White House went into this past weekend, pretty much dominating the news all week with executive orders and actions and his flight out to California. I heard the president at a signing ceremony saying, "We've got the water turned back on in California." By the way, water experts in California report there is no valve that turns the water on from the north to the south. They don't even know what he's talking about. But when he says these things, he makes news. And so for his purposes of controlling the news coverage, chaos helps. Where it doesn't help, and polling that came out after last week suggests that for most of these great executive orders signed with fanfare and held up so everybody could witness his bold signature. Most of them don't even get, 3 out of 10 people supporting it. In fact, in one survey with a long list of the initiatives, the only one that got above 50% was reducing the size of government. And as Al points out, their efforts the ball was fumbled right out of the gate. The White House now saying, by the way, and here's the traditional finger pointing we love in Washington. Oh, it wasn't the White House. It was the Office of Management and Budget. They put out a statement before we cleared it at the White House. Well, guess what, gang? The Office of Management and Budget is part of the Executive Office of the White House. It sits right next door to the West Wing. And if, in fact, they manage to do that, shame on your White House process, because that shouldn't happen. But anyway, point being, chaos controls a lot of news coverage. It doesn't necessarily win you political support. And I think last week, kudos for controlling the coverage, but it didn't help. This week and this morning, we are reminded that the people who reside and work on that 18-acre compound called the White House don't control the news, don't control the story. The story of the day is the tragedy of a mid-air collision between a small commercial aircraft and a military helicopter. That's all the news is, all they're talking about today. They'll be talking about it through the weekend. We'll be looking at what went wrong, was somebody at fault. I have my thoughts. I've flew airplanes for 50 years, from small 2-seaters to business jets. In some ways, it looks like everybody was doing what was right on a very clear night in Washington, D.C., with a very busy airport. There was a collision. I might add that, that airport, Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., has constant pressure from all sorts of constituencies, especially the Congress, to put more flights into the airport. It serves millions more people a year than it was designed to serve. It's not the air traffic controllers who control how many airplanes arrive at that airport at any given period of time. And literally dozens of flights were taking off and landing at this very busy time. Get to the bottom of it. My point is that real events suddenly dominate the news. And by the way, what does Donald Trump do last night around midnight? He issues a post in which he's giving guidance to what the air traffic controllers should have done. They should have told the helicopter to go up or down. This is the most naive of statements, and it's the worst time for a president to suddenly dive into the middle of an air tragedy in that way. So I don't think that the chaos, and I don't think that just inserting yourself into news stories, as Trump is wont to do, is going to build him support. That's not what the American people are looking for. And those who voted for him, a majority of voters to be sure, are not looking for that either. They're looking for lower prices, lower inflation, a better, standard of living. None of these things are really delivering that to them.
Hey, Al, I want to move from chaos to confusion and talk a little bit about the RFK Jr. Testimony that took place yesterday. It's a very interesting test about whether Trump can get these people through Senate approval. But there's so many inconsistencies with Bobby Kennedy's positions on vaccines and other health-related matters. You think that he's going to get through this process?
Before we get to Bobby Kennedy, though, Craig just said, if the president really wanted to do something that was useful, he'd be trying to figure out how we deal with bird flu that's driven the price of eggs in Chicago up to $7 a dozen. That's going to have much more impact than all this crazy nonsense that he's doing. Look, Robert F. Kennedy is not qualified. He's a danger to the public health. He's against vaccines. Was it in Samoa that there was a measles outbreak, and he basically said, "Don't get vaccinated," and people, and a lot of kids died, and or some kids died. And this is really a test for the Republican majority. I can't believe that Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins would ever vote for him. I can't believe that Mitch McConnell, those are the three who voted against Hegseth, was a polio survivor, would vote for him. And he's apparently at a hearing today before Senator Bill Cassidy, who's a doctor from Louisiana. I really can't believe that who voted incidentally for conviction of Trump last year in the impeachment trial, or in January 2021 in the impeachment trial. I really can't believe in good conscience he could vote for Robert F. Kennedy, and that would sink the nomination. But we'll see if we can get to 4. I mean, that's really the question. We have nominees. Hegseth was one, but in Robert F. Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, who absolutely, in the interest of the country, should not be confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see. I don't want to exaggerate, but our democracy really hangs on the ability of the other two co-equal branches of government to exercise their prerogatives, to have checks and balances on executive power.
Yeah.
I don't want to imply that if it were a Democratic president, he did the same thing, and the Democrats were in control, that they might not just do the same thing the Republicans seem to be willing to do, because it's hard, with very few exceptions, to have to reject cabinet appointments, and it's very hard when the Senate majority is the same as the president's party. But in any event, I think this is really going to be a test, and I don't know what the answer is.
Greg, you have the last word.
So I'm pretty much where Al is on this. You know, when an individual is elected to the United States Senate, that comes with the responsibility of confirming nominations by a president to major departments and agencies. There is no department or agency that touches more lives, American lives, than the Department of Health and Human Services. And when, as a United States Senator, forget, the rhetoric, the campaign talk and all that, listen to what was said at that hearing. When a United States Senator hears who's listening to this individual, Bobby Kennedy, talk, he's recanting positions that he's written about where he's opposed, vaccines. Somehow, that was then, this is now. The phrase "I was against it before I was for it" has never been a particularly good piece of rhetoric to use in the political environment. But that was his whole testimony. I listened to a very interesting interpretation by a physician out of Pennsylvania from Children's Hospital who works with child vaccines, who said, Bobby Kennedy has been saying the same thing for 20 years. He's opposed to these. He gave the same example Al did, where people died because Bobby Kennedy opposed measles vaccine, scared people with it.
Yeah.
And what this doctor said was a very clever message has been crafted. So what Bobby Kennedy won't say anymore is he's against vaccines. What he does say is he wants safe vaccines.
Yeah.
As though for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we have been uncertain about the safety of these vaccines.
Yeah.
He leaves this illusion that all he really wants are safe vaccines. Well, guess what? The record is replete with evidence that they're safe, but he won't go there. So I mean, it's inconceivable to me that a person could look at an individual nominated who not only has political opposition, his family's against him. The people that know him best don't want him close to this job. Yeah. And how could a senator sit there and in good conscience say, out of 330 some million people, this is the best we can do to run this department? I really do not understand it. And it will be, in my view, to my friends in the Republican Party, shameful if they go ahead and confirm this nomination.
Time to wrap it up. Al, Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.